We've all had those moments when life seems so predictable, almost boring, and you start thinking you've figured it all out. For years, I kept thinking that my relationship with my son Henry was set in stone. We were close, sure, but you know how it is. After a certain age, you just settle into a rhythm. We'd have our chats, our dinners, and everything felt pretty normal. But that trip, the one I thought would be just another weekend getaway, turned out to be the moment that changed everything. I'll admit, I wasn't excited about it at first. My friends had been raving about family trips for ages. It's a chance to reconnect, they'd say. I was skeptical. My husband, God bless him, had passed away a few years ago, and I hadn't traveled much since then. The idea of spending time with Henry, now in his 30s, felt more like a routine than a rejuvenating escape. He was a good son, but he was also a man with his own life. It had been a while since we had spent time together, like we did when he was younger. But when Henry suggested we go on a little trip to the mountains, I couldn't resist. "It'll be good for you, Mom," he said, his voice soft with that caring tone only he had. And there it was, the part of me that always put others first, the part that never wanted to disappoint, agreed before I could even think it through. So, we packed our bags. The weekend trip was to a cabin in the mountains, just the two of us. It was the kind of place you could lose yourself in, far enough away from the noise of everyday life, but close enough to remind you of what you'd left behind. The cabin was rustic but charming, tucked into the side of a mountain with large windows that gave a stunning view of the valley below. When we arrived, the sun was setting, casting a golden glow across the landscape. The crisp air felt refreshing as we stepped out of the car. Henry had taken care of the details, booking the cabin, making sure we had everything we needed. I was grateful for his thoughtfulness. He always seemed to know what I needed before I did. We unpacked our bags and settled in. The silence of the mountains was soothing, but I couldn't help but feel a little awkward. It had been so long since it was just Henry and me with no distractions, no daily routine, just time to talk or sit in the quiet together. I didn't know what to expect. That night, we ate dinner by the fire. The warmth of the flames and the scent of the wood burning filled the room. We talked about everything and nothing. Family, life, old memories. Henry asked about my favorite trips I had taken with his father before he passed. I told him about our honeymoon in Paris, how we had wandered through the streets, laughing about silly things, feeling young and carefree. Henry listened attentively, nodding as I spoke, and for a moment it felt like we were back in those days when he was little, sitting around the table with the three of us. But then, in the quiet after dinner, something shifted. Henry cleared his throat, a small nervous sound. I looked up from my cup of tea, raising an eyebrow. "You know, Mom, there's something I've been wanting to tell you," he said, his voice a little hesitant. I set my cup down. My curiosity piqued. I'd heard that tone before. "What's on your mind, Henry?" He shifted in his chair, his fingers tapping the side of his mug as if gathering his thoughts. "It's about us. Our relationship, I mean." I frowned slightly, unsure of where this was going. "What do you mean?" Henry hesitated again before speaking. "I've been thinking a lot about how we've been, since Dad passed, how things kind of settled into a routine. I think we both got comfortable with that, but I don't want us to miss out on the chance to really reconnect. I've noticed that we don't really talk about the deeper things, about what's really going on in our lives. And I think we should. I think we need to." I was taken aback. My son had always been someone I could rely on, but I never realized he had been carrying this feeling. His words hung in the air, and for a moment, I didn't know what to say. I looked at him, my eyes softening. There was something vulnerable in his expression, something I hadn't seen in a long time. I felt a rush of emotion, love, regret, and a little sadness. "I didn't realize you felt that way," I said quietly.
"I'm sorry, Henry."
"I know I've been caught up in my own grief. Didn't mean to distance myself from you." Henry smiled a little more at ease now. "It's not about blame, Mom. We just haven't talked like we used to. I miss that." I smiled back, feeling a wave of warmth spread through me. He was right. We hadn't really talked about things that mattered in a long time. Our conversations had become more about the mundane, about the day-to-day. We'd both been trying to fill the empty spaces left by his father in different ways. but we hadn't truly connected in a long time. And in that moment, sitting by the fire, I realized that this trip wasn't just a family getaway. It was a chance to rediscover something precious, something I hadn't even realized I had lost. As the night went on, we talked about all the things we hadn't said. We laughed, we cried, and we shared the things that had been buried deep inside us. There was something healing about it, something that made me feel lighter, as though a weight I hadn't even known I was carrying had finally been lifted. I thought this trip was just going to be a simple family getaway, but it turned into something far more meaningful. It was the beginning of something new, something I hadn't expected but desperately needed. As the days passed in the cabin, Henry and I found ourselves settling into a new rhythm. The silence that had once been so heavy between us was now filled with conversations, small talks, deep discussions, and moments of reflection. It was like peeling back layers of a relationship I thought I had known inside out, only to discover there was so much more beneath the surface. The morning started slow with cups of coffee shared over the breakfast table, watching the fog roll down the mountainside. We would sit in companionable silence, and then without fail, Henry would ask me a question that made me pause and think about life, about memories, about my own fears and hopes. "Mom," he said one morning, his voice calm but serious. "What's something you've always wanted to do but never did?" I had to think for a moment. At 57, I felt like I'd done most of what I'd set out to do. Travel, raise a family, build a life. But when I really dug deep, I realized there was still a part of me that had dreams I'd tucked away. "I always wanted to take a painting class," I said finally, the words feeling strange as they left my mouth, but I never got around to it. Henry raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. "Why not?" "Well," I hesitated. "Life just got in the way. There was always something else to focus on. Work, family, the house. I never felt like I had time for things just for me." "That's sad," he said softly. "You should have done it." His words hit me harder than I expected. The sadness in his voice wasn't just about my unfulfilled dream. It was about something deeper, something I hadn't really seen before. The idea that my son, a grown man now, still saw me in a way that made him want me to be more than just a mother, but a person with dreams and passions of her own. I smiled at him, though there was a bit of a lump in my throat. "Maybe it's not too late," I said, though I wasn't entirely sure if I believed it. We spent the day exploring the area, walking through the woods near the cabin. The crisp autumn air smelled like pine and earth, and the golden light of the afternoon made the trees look as though they were on fire. It was the kind of peaceful day that made you forget about the world beyond the mountains, the worries and stresses that followed you everywhere else. But for Henry and me, it was the kind of day that allowed us to be just two people, a mother and son, rediscovering each other. By evening, we were sitting on the porch, the sun just dipping below the horizon. Henry had brought out a bottle of wine, and we sipped it slowly, savoring the moment. I couldn't remember the last time I'd felt so calm, so at peace with my own thoughts and feelings. "You know," Henry began, breaking the silence. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said last night, about how we haven't really talked like this in a while." I turned toward him, intrigued. "What about it?" I think he paused, gathering his words. "I think we've both been so focused on the past, on what we've lost, that we forgot about what's still here, what's still possible." His words struck me again, like a gentle wake-up call. He was right. We'd spent so much time grieving, so much time looking back, that we had forgotten to look forward. The idea of moving on, of embracing the future, had felt almost impossible at times. But now, sitting here on the porch with my son, I realized something. Maybe it wasn't just about mourning what was gone. Maybe it was about embracing the opportunities that still lay ahead. I took a deep breath, the cool air filling my lungs. "You're right, Henry. I've been so caught up in what's been lost that I haven't really allowed myself to think about what's still possible. Maybe it's time for me to start thinking about the future." We fell into a comfortable silence again, and I felt a new kind of connection forming between us. It wasn't just the mother-son bond that had always been there. It was something deeper, something more mature. We were both learning how to move forward, how to embrace the unknowns of life, even when it seemed scary or uncertain. That night after dinner, we sat by the fire again. The crackling of the wood was the only sound in the cabin, and it felt intimate, like the world had shrunk to just the two of us in this small, quiet space. I looked at Henry, the firelight casting shadows across his face. "I'm glad we came here," I said softly. "This trip, it's more than I expected. It's given me a chance to think, to reflect on things I've been avoiding for a long time." Henry smiled. And for the first time in a while, I saw him not just as my son, but as a man, someone who had his own life, his own experiences, and who had something to teach me. "I'm glad too, Mom. I think we both needed this, a chance to remember who we are outside of everything that's happened, to just be us." It was a simple statement, but it held so much truth. In that moment, I realized that this trip wasn't just about reconnecting. It was about rediscovering who we were, both as individuals and as family. And as the fire flickered low and the night stretched out around us, I felt a shift within myself. I wasn't the same person who had come up here a few days ago, and neither was Henry. We were different, yes, but in the best possible way. We were beginning to understand each other again in a way that felt more real and meaningful than ever before. The trip wasn't over yet, and I knew we still had a lot of ground to cover. But for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful about life, about Henry, about me. As the days passed, our time in the cabin began to feel like a dream. It was as if the outside world didn't exist, and we were suspended in a moment where nothing mattered except the two of us. Henry and I continued to talk about everything, about nothing. And the more we spoke, the more I realized how much I had missed these deep, meaningful conversations with him. We spent one afternoon walking to a nearby lake, the path winding through trees and over streams. The sun was higher now, and the sky was clear, a perfect blue canvas above us. We stopped by the water's edge, the gentle ripples reflecting the surrounding mountains like a mirror. For a while, we just stood there taking it all in, enjoying the quiet and the peace. "You know," Henry said after a while, breaking the silence, "I've been thinking about what you said the other night about how you never took that painting class." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh, and what about it?" "I think you should do it," he said with a smile. "I mean, why not? You've got nothing to lose, right? You've spent so much time putting others first, taking care of everything and everyone else. You deserve to do something just for you." I felt a lump form in my throat at his words. It was the kind of thing I'd always wanted to hear, but never thought I'd actually hear from him. I'd always known he was a good son, but in that moment, I realized just how much he understood me, how much he wanted me to be happy. "You really think I should?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He nodded. "Absolutely. I think it would be good for you. You've always had a creative side, and I've seen you sketching sometimes. I don't think you've given yourself enough credit for it." I smiled softly, feeling a warmth spread through me. "Maybe you're right." Henry stepped closer, his eyes reflecting the same sincerity in his voice. "I'm serious, Mom. If you want to start painting, do it. I'll help however I can. I think it'll be good for you." I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for him in that moment. He wasn't just my son. He was someone who cared about me as a person. Someone who wanted me to be more than just a mother. And it was that realization that finally broke down the walls I'd built around myself after his father's passing. I'd hidden behind the label of being a widow, a mother, a caretaker. And I'd forgotten that I was also Lauren. The woman who had dreams, who had passions, who was still alive and capable of growing, learning, and experiencing new things. We stayed at the lake for a while longer, just soaking in the beauty of the place and the bond we were rediscovering. As we made our way back to the cabin, I felt lighter, as though a weight I hadn't realized I was carrying had been lifted. That evening, as we sat down to our last dinner in the cabin, I couldn't help but feel a mix of emotions. The trip had been everything I didn't know I needed. I had come up here thinking it would be a simple escape, a way to spend a few quiet days with my son. But it had turned into something far more profound. It had been a journey, one of healing, rediscovery, and growth. As we ate, Henry turned to me with a look in his eyes that I couldn't quite place. "I'm really glad we did this, Mom. It feels like we've come full circle, you know, like we're both in a better place now." I smiled, feeling my heart swell. "I am too, Henry. I think we've learned a lot from each other this week, about ourselves, about each other." He nodded, his expression softening. "Yeah. And it's made me realize that I want to spend more time with you. Not just on trips like this, but in everyday life. I don't want us to go back to just the routine. I want us to keep talking, keep sharing, keep growing together. I felt a deep sense of relief, a weight lifted from my shoulders. I had feared in the years since his father's passing that Henry and I would drift apart, that our lives would continue to move in separate directions with no real connection. But now, sitting across from him, I knew that wasn't the case. We were moving forward together. "I think that's a good idea," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I think we can make it work." "I want that too." As the evening stretched on, we shared stories and laughter, and I realized just how much I had missed this. I had spent so many years grieving, so many years lost in my own sorrow, that I had forgotten how to truly live. But now, with Henry beside me, I was starting to remember what it meant to embrace life again. The trip wasn't just about reconnecting with Henry. It was about reconnecting with myself, with the parts of me I had forgotten or abandoned in the wake of grief. It was about learning to live fully again, to find joy in the present, and to look forward to the future with hope. As we packed up to leave the next morning, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't alone.